Hey, you guys, LaTricia Morris, brand revivalist and owner of Ox and Iron. So excited today to get the opportunity to interview the Rob Patz, mastermind behind Abundant TV. This man is out here making waves in the marketplace and for the kingdom. I am so excited to hear everything that he's going to share. Rob, would you take a quick moment to introduce yourself to the world, share a little bit more about your business and what it is that you do?
Oh, thank you so much. Such an honor to be on your show. Love what you're doing. It is so much fun. In fact, I told somebody I get to be on your show, and I was just talking to them just a few minutes ago. And so it's exciting to be here. My name is Rob Patz. For those that don't know, it's a weird last name that very few people get right, unless you live in Wisconsin, where there's a part of our family that lives there. And you know, if you're from Wisconsin, you'll know. But for me, I grew up in a pastor's home, which was really neat because not only was it a pastor's home, and this is the part I think is so incredible, but it was a entrepreneur's home also. My mom and dad, besides being pastors, owned several businesses. They owned some dry cleaners and some companies that rented equipment for people that did dry cleaning and all of that kind of stuff. So I grew up, to be honest with you, around business and around ministry, both things. In fact, my mom used to love to tell the funny story when she would speak at women's groups, about my kindergarten project for Halloween. You were supposed to make a drawing for your parents, and I put in times for our one of our dry cleaners. And on the Halloween, it was a pumpkin, some grass, and then it had open at 10, closes at 8. It had all the times on there. So I think that I grew up with business as part of who I was, ministry always being part of who I was, and just knowing that the two can, be married together and work together. And I find that to be the most exciting thing, that God allows us the wisdom to be able to conduct business and ministry at the same time.
So cool. And I tell you what, like I always get so excited when it comes to marketplace ministry. Anybody that knows me knows that that is a hype topic for me, especially considering it's like I think sometimes it can be easy to put that in a box, right? We can say like, oh well, maybe some people have a little bit more liberty in the expression of their faith in one context versus another. And I think that God wants to infiltrate all of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And when I look at business, I see it's like there's so many different ways that it's like pray for people, sure, but also what is it that we are saying about how we conduct our lives by virtue of how we conduct our businesses? And so seeing how so many people are just stepping into that kingdom mindset with business is just so cool.
I love that. And I think there's freedom now more than ever. And I think the biggest thing for a lot of people, they'll say, well, I'm too scared to share my faith. I think it's just living the example. I the biggest compliment that I get when I'm working with a secular client, and I do that, is they'll say, hey, listen, I know you have this faith. Would you pray for me? Or will you pray for my family? Or I don't understand. And the biggest thing for me a lot of times is I'll get people that'll say, I don't understand how you're always so happy, but what is it that makes you happy? And I'm like, well, God made me this way. I'm just goofy as can be. You can ask my wife. I'm goofy like this all the time. And it gives me an opportunity to say, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I always love that statement because it's true. And so if you're struggling, and for me it is, I mean, I'm a pastor's kid. I'll tell you this, the hardest thing at times for anybody is sharing their faith. So sometimes
Mm.
God asks us to just be ourselves, be the person that he has created us to be. And sometimes that's the best example. I know the cliche thing, which sometimes you're the only Bible that someone reads, and I get that, but at the same time, it's really true.
Yeah. Well, in step with that, I think, there are a lot of people that have been jaded by the state of the church when they see people that are doing the Sunday thing, but not really seeing what's preached on Sunday translate into real life. And I think that's where we have the opportunity to set a very different example and bring a lot more light into a world that so desperately needs it by saying, no, the same person I am on Sunday is the same person I am throughout Monday Tuesday, Wednesday, like every day of the week, and that being, operating in joy, operate and not saying that we don't ever have our moments, right? But being real people that are still very much committed to our faith and very much committed to loving God and loving people in anything that we do. And then also seeing how that translates into a standard of excellence in what we set our hands to that says, like, no, we show up with an eagerness to contribute to the community, with an eagerness to create opportunities and build people up. And we can do that whether we're working as an employee or as a business owner. I know, like, in my own space, like, the a sense of entrepreneurship is like, oh, let's just take off running with that.
Well, and I think a great point you made early on in what you were saying there is, yeah, as Christians, it's not perfect. I will tell you this, and I can go back to last year, last September, the end of September, early October. I had a situation where two of my biggest clients for my company, and it's what I do is I do consulting for ministries, helping them get on Christian television and radio. Besides the abundant TV arm of what I do that. Two of my biggest clients had given us notice that they were leaving. And I will tell you, as someone who's lived their faith pretty much their entire life, I was very young when I got saved. Jesus and I had a moment. We had a complete moment, and I walked through my house, and at that moment I said, God, what are you doing? Because without that's like 60% of my business is those two clients, 60% of what we do. And I said, God, what are you doing? Like, what is this? I've been faithful, I've sown seeds, I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. Why right now are you just like, it feels like you're crushing me, and it feels like you're taking away the one thing that I have such a passion. And I love what you said about that, about having a passion for being an entrepreneur. I love what I do. There's not a day, I don't have a bad day of going to work. I love going to work because I love what I do. But Jesus and I, we had about a 45-minute session. Was It was mostly me talking and him listening, which happens a lot. But he was listening to everything. This is not fair. And I'm sure, like, because we talk about, and here's the big thing. If we truly believe that God is our father, at times we're like his kids. And I'm sure he was up there going, really, we're going through this. And I'm sure because we just, my wife and I read in the Old Testament right now. And I swear, I am sometimes the Israelites. I'm like, this is not fair. Why are we just having manna? Why is this way? What is going on? So I had this time, and it was a full day, literally a full day of not praying the whole time, but very during segments of my day where I'm like, it's not fair. It's not fair, God. This doesn't seem fair. And we the it was and it's a real time prayer. When I pray, it's real time. I mean, God will, it's a back and forth. It's not just me having my say in it. And he said, it's if you don't trust me in the hard times, then you really aren't trusting me in the easy times. And it was like,
Ooh,
yeah,
you're like,
because
oof.
yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, okay, God, I'll go over here to my corner for a while, and I'll digest that. And I digested it overnight, and literally the next morning, both clients called. One upped their amount, the other upped their amount for this next year, the other one for multiple years. And it was like, I think God wanted me to have that moment to go, hey, listen, Sparky, you've had all these times where you've been doing it, and you think now after 27 years of doing this that you got this down, but you got to remember, I'm the one that gave you all of these gifts, all of the things that you're doing, and the opportunities that you're having, whether that's helping
Mm.
ministries be on television or creating a TV network that now is the fastest growing Christian television network in the world. It's like you don't you and I think it's so easy, and I think you'll agree with me that when you're in the midst of the moment of creating, sometimes you forget to go, this isn't really me. This is God doing this. And then there are times where, trust me, I'm not that smart. There are things I've pulled off that I look at and I go, oh, that was cool. I didn't have any part of that. That was not me at all.
Yeah.
And I'll tell my friends that. I'll say, hey, listen, You know me. You know I'm not that smart. I could not have pulled that off. That was a God moment. So I think that's it. And if you're struggling, man, if you're listening to this and you're young in business, or maybe you're working for somebody else and you're thinking about starting your own thing, it's not always going to be perfect. And the grind is sometimes the grind. I mean, literally, I think you and I can both say that there is that. But if God is the center of what you're doing, going back again, I think to what we started with, which is in the marketplace, how are you sharing who you are? That will make you transparent. And I think the time that we live in and the world that we live in, and I deal a lot with marketing. And if you can't be transparent with people, you aren't going to be able to either create a service product that people want, or a product that they want. And not to say, hey, listen, this is what it is. I'll tell you, first and foremost, when we started the television network, and I have a background of 20 plus years in television, and I still didn't know, and we made mistakes, and I told people, hey, listen, we goofed, this is bad, this was not good. Or we had problems, but we learned from those problems. And I think if you learn with grace and with transparency, people respect that. And now people will expect and believe what you say. If you live a transparent, I mean, people know, it's super funny. I'll tell this story really quick. People know I love chocolate cake. Like, that's like my thing. And it's like it's a thread through every conversation I have with people. There are now people that will send me recipes for chocolate cake, which obviously they don't know me that well. If they're thinking I'm going to bake a cake, it would have to be my wife, and that's not her. She does like to bake, but not chocolate cakes. And so yeah, I think if I could preach to people right now that are business owners, and maybe it's and it was uncomfortable for me, is transparency. When you're a pastor's kid, you have to live at a certain level that is a protected level, because the people at church don't need to know everything going on at the pastor's
Right.
house. It's just that way. And so when I got into business, when I started, like I said, in the late 90s, you that wasn't a thing. We weren't being transparent in business. We were, everything's great. Whee, this is fun. We're doing great business. And you'd go to chamber of commerce meetings and you'd tell people, oh yeah, things are awesome. And you'd go home and go, I hope I can pay the light bill today. And that was it. Now you're transparent with, and it's, especially I've grown in a transparency thing of, hey, listen, we're doing great, but we could always do better. Or and not only in the service we provide, but in the things that we're financially getting. Could we have more success? Of course. Is God going to bless us? I always believe that. I know He is my provider.
I love so much of what you said there. And one of the things that I was thinking back to, and what you said a couple moments ago, was understanding that, I think as a Christian in business, really a Christian in life, right? But I think especially in the entrepreneurial space, it's easy to measure our perception of God's presence based on the wrong metrics. And it's easy to say, okay, revenue is good. This is good. Like, his presence must be with me. And then if all that goes out the door, oh my gosh, I must be cursed. I must, like, all of these things, right? We can think or feel those things, but thinking and feeling them doesn't make them reality. And the presence of ease versus the presence of hardship, neither one of them is directly indicative of the presence of God. And so when we look at the journey that comes with our walk in business, it is present with a lot of challenges. There are a lot of different things that we come up against, and we come against setbacks and all of that. But at the same time, I think we also miss that the resilience is its own testimony. Like, what we have found in Him and the ability to persevere in through those things and still have the faith and the vision to go past all of that and face the impossible and just keep going, keeping our eyes focused on Jesus, our author and perfecter of our faith. That in itself is a testimony that the world would not see if Christians stopped anywhere that it doesn't get easy. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, life isn't always convenient.
Well, you look at a great example of business is Daniel in the Old Testament. It's a very interesting story. Daniel was successful at that moment, and he continued to follow God. And all of a sudden, you would say his business had a downturn because he was in the lion's den. and yet he had the most peace and the most comfort to know that God was there with him and that he was dealing with it. And trust me, I think as business people, there are times where we wake up and we go, huh, this is definitely the lion's den that I'm currently in. And we have those moments. And I think that we have to be able, if we're saying that we truly are Christian business people, we have to say, I'm going to be as comfortable in the palace as I am in the lion's den. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to take a nap on a lion, which to me, by the way, best Sunday school story. I always thought it was so cool that he would just rest in there. We don't know if that's a fact or not. I'm sure they may have just been all scared and they may have been over on the other side of the den and he was there on his side. I prefer to think that he was laying sleeping on one of the kitties, but that's just my own thing. But I think that's business too, because you can be in the palace 1 minute and the next minute, whoops, hey, they just threw you in with the lions. And you have to have and I always want to stress this to people. You have to have the same managerial feeling when you're in the palace as when you're in the lines. You can't panic. Look at Daniel. He didn't panic. He knew God was with him in the den just as much as he was with him in the palace. So if you're in business and you're going, yeah, but you don't understand, Rob. Right now, I'm behind like $100. I do. I understand it because when I started my business, I borrowed 140,000, I think it was, from my parents. Talk about being back behind it to start with and in a bad place. And I knew that the stress was there to get going. And there were times where I was like, okay, God, you can show up now. Today would be a good day. And he didn't always, but I always knew he was faithful.
Mm. Well, and I know for myself, like I've seen many a times over where in retrospect, we see where he was building us up or shifting things in our character or, actually putting other things into place. And I think sometimes too, even allowing us to go through the challenges that force innovation or force a different level of productivity than we may have been motivated to realize if we were just complacent and relaxing in that spirit of ease and everything's good, sales are great, this is just everything's just going perfect, right? But it's like it does put us into a state of mind where we can fold and we can give up, or we can choose to reframe, right, put it in a proper kingdom context and then press in to the challenge and like really just going and seeing how we can leverage what we've been given to go out and do what it is that God has called us to do. And I think sometimes too there's that of saying, okay, like we've been entrusted as stewards. He's given us good seed, he's given us good resources, he's given us talents, skills, ability, knowledge, wisdom. He says, ask for the wisdom and he grants it, right? How are we putting that to work to the best of our ability to faithfully steward what he's given? And
Yep.
not only moving when it's like, if 5 people come up to me and tell me what I should do, then I'll do it. But just saying, okay, God, like I think sometimes we get so caught up in, especially in those high stress situations of that sense of analysis paralysis, the fear of making the wrong move. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't want to make the wrong decision. I don't want to make a bad decision. I certainly can't afford to go from bad to worse. Then, but it is the real deal of entrepreneurship and a journey that so many of us do walk through. I mean, kudos to those that don't have to do the hard way, but that's not been the experience that I've seen recounted by a lot of people that I know, a lot of entrepreneurs that I've come across. And it doesn't mean that on the whole that they're not successful. It just means that there's a process to bringing it out.
And I think this is one thing that I've been studying about being an entrepreneur for the last year. Really for it's my own like looking into why, first place, why I was created this way. Um, and kind of then, kind of analyzing who I am and how I can sow into other people. Cause I'm at a point now, like I said, 27 years of doing this. I want to sow into people. And I think the biggest thing I've learned over this last year, and it's very biblical because it's out there in every circumstance where something successful happened in the Bible. Not only did they pray about it, not only did they seek God, maybe they fasted, whatever it was, but then it says they got up and went. took action, whatever it was. There's so many different versions. Sometimes, and I love what you said, five people come up. There are. I mean, we have that moment where we're like, oh, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to lose this money. I don't want to do this, or I've failed in the past. So many entrepreneurs fail. I mean, you're going to fail. That's life. I mean, there are times where I have thought I had the most brilliant thing and it laid a goose egg. I mean, we had zero sales. I mean, I've had to fess up to bad decisions, and there have been some. But also, God expects us, even in our, I think our inaction will cause more grief, more stress than taking the wrong, even the wrong action. But sometimes the wrong action in your mind is not really the wrong action. It's the path that God is taking you on to learn and to dive into something. I was on with a buddy of mine who's an entrepreneur, owns businesses throughout the state of Georgia, and we were talking about a rule that everybody talks about, and that's the 1% rule. If I'm 1% better today than I was yesterday, where am I going to be? And it sounds cliche and it sounds corny, but if you really do, if you say, hey, listen, instead of 10 emails, I'm going to send out that 11th email. I'm going to follow up to that one more person. I will tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, pushing yourself 1% more each day will take you to new levels, put you in new places, put you in rooms that you never imagined. And I believe that. I believe 26 for Christians. This is and if this freaks you out, people that are listening, I'm sorry, but God was talking to me about this the other day, and this is the year of next. This is your next level. This is your next move. This is where God is taking you to your next, whatever that next is, whatever that next dream is, whatever your business is going to that next level. This is your year. And this is actually the first place. Gotta be honest with you, was going to save this for my own show, but instead we're doing it here. It is. This is your year. This is your next year. This isn't, I'm waiting until next year. Please don't do that. And please don't be like, and I'll tell you this, my mom called me a worrywart. So I worry about every decision. And this is your year. This is your next. You've got to step boldly into what God has for you. He didn't give you that dream just so you could think about it for another year. He didn't give you that dream to taunt you. He gave you that dream to bring it to fruition in whatever area it is in your life, whatever you're doing, whether you own a daycare or you own a tow truck company or you sell real estate or whatever it is you do, this is your year for next.
You just keep on preaching. I love it. Because, I have had so many conversations with many people that have been in these like similar seasons where I liken it to the arrow being drawn back. Right. And it's that point where here, I love the passage in Isaiah where he says that he made me as a polished arrow and he placed me in his quiver. And I hit on that recently as I was actually speaking at the summit and talking about how it's just such a beautiful picture that, like, when you look at an arrow is not shotgun. It doesn't splatter everywhere. It doesn't go all these different places. It's very pointed. It's very precise. God is very precise. And to think of what he could be doing through anybody that's listening here, where he says, you know what? I've got just the arrow that I'm saving for just such an occasion. And in that part where he is loading them and getting them into position, you have to go backwards in order to get the tension that's needed in order to send that thing flying. And that's not the comfortable part for us. We love hearing that the suddenly blessing part and that God's going to just blow your mind with all the things that he's doing. Like, yes, if we can step into that, that's wonderful. I wouldn't negate that for anybody. But at the same time, like, being in the entrepreneurial space, being in business and seeing, I know my own journey and that I've watched so many others walking alongside me is like, there often is that point of tension where you're like, God, why does it feel like everything is moving in reverse? And I thought we were going this way, but it looks like we're going that way. But then what comes right after that? It's like, as soon as he gets you to that right there, right where he wants it, then he releases it. And it, like, once it's released, it is boom on target. And I believe there are so many people that are getting ready to do straight damage to darkness with the lives that they're living just by virtue of what God is doing as he is releasing them right into exactly what he's called them to. Not all these other things, not being fragmented and all over the place, but being pointed and right on target.
Yep. I love what you said about suddenly. I've done some research because there are times when God uses a word for me and it comes up over and over and I see it everywhere. And
Yep.
it's not because I thought of the word, it just starts to be there. And pretty soon after 10 or 15 times of seeing it, I go, okay, God, what do you have? And usually though, the
Yeah.
suddenlies that I've studied and the people that say, well, suddenly it changed, there was that laying the groundwork, laying the hard steps that you had to take. And again, usually it shows you taking an action. It's taken. I would love,
Mhm.
we used to joke about it was a 10-year overnight success for our company.
Yeah.
And that was what it was. It was because people would say, I remember about 10 years into my company, wow, you're like an overnight success. And I was like, no, where were you 10 years ago when I was eating spaghettios and mac and cheese in my apartment?
Right.
You weren't there in my suddenly, because the suddenly happened after I had worked really hard and God really blessed. And I think it's being faithful in the small things. And I always hate that because I always
Mm.
hated when I heard that when I was a young entrepreneur, because it always made me feel like there was always an old person telling me. So here's your old person telling you, if you're a young entrepreneur, hey, take that, the blessings of the small thing, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I I've got an opportunity recently to do a couple of things, and they're small. They're they're not what you would say dramatic in a big sense, but I find such joy in that moment of the small thing, because it's like God is birthing something new, and when he's birthing that new thing is, don't be so, and I can say this in life too because I lived it. Don't be so caught up in what you're doing that you miss the things that are going on around you. Don't miss the
Mm.
opportunities that God has outside of working. God wants you to live a balanced life. My dad used to say this, and he was a pastor who also owned several businesses and a car dealership, all kinds of stuff. Um, he said, you need at some point to find a balance between what it is that you do and the family and the people that God has given you. And so if I can encourage people, hey, listen, it's great. I'll grind. My wife and I, we are answering email at 11:30 at night. I will also tell you that we went last year on I forget how many trips, and during that time we park everything because my wife is very successful in her career also, but we park the stuff during that time and we go like Savannah, like we were in Savannah for a long weekend, and we don't try, let me rephrase that. We don't work overall. You will catch me checking my email. You will go, we were walking, this is why I thought of this. We were walking, we are headed to go get pizza because there's a very famous pizza place in Savannah, and I wanted pizza because I love pizza. Well, just look at me. I mean, obviously, I love pizza. I'm a chunky guy, and so we were headed there, and we immediately had this business idea, and it's an idea that we've now are getting ready to launch, and it was something that we did, but it was God saying, be faithful in your time with your spouse, be faithful with your time with your family, be faithful, and then I will add unto the things you're doing. And I love that. And I always say this: it's pressed down, shaken together, and running over. When you follow what God has and what He's doing, He will do that. And you'll say, "Well, Rob, I'm not in a place. You may not be there right now. You may be walking through the desert, but it's coming." It's when I said about the next, I truly believe there is somebody listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, and their next is here. They're fearful of what it is that they're dealing with, but it's here. It's time. You've laid the groundwork. You've done all the hard stuff. Now it's time to take that step, move into the business that you've wanted, move into it. But and I love what you said, be mindful, be full of integrity, and be excellent. I think if I can share anything else with your audience is, I'm not perfect and everything I do is not excellent, but that's what I strive to do. I mean, there are days where I fall miserably short in that department, but the striving part, or the going to part of it, is going to that. You may not be excellent today. You may be, this may be your first time of doing whatever it is you're doing, but I'll tell you this, it's like television. You do it enough, after a while it becomes like second nature. I can do it without having to think about it, which would explain a lot of the answers I usually give. So
Well, going back and coupling along with that too, and also for anybody that's listening that might feel like they might either be at a place of just getting things started, or even be in a place where they're already doing big things, but God has bigger in mind. Is what passage come to mind is where it says, "Do not despise the day of small beginnings, for the Lord loves to see the work begin, or He delights to see the work begin." And how much does that speak to the heart of God and seeing the beautiful things that He has in store for that person that's just willing to take that first step and putting that faith to action? I remember back when I first started learning how to do any graphic design work, I did not set out to be a branding agent. I didn't set out to be a graphic designer at that time in my life. If you had said that's what I was going to step into, I'd have been like, what are you even talking about? But if you look back on my timeline beyond then, like way earlier, teenage years, like there were signs. There were definitely signs that that was where I was going, even when I didn't detect it. But at the time, I started learning on something that I was passionate about bringing into the world. And God knew that it wasn't going to take off in all the ways that I hoped it would, right? Like in that particular thing. But at the same time, He used it as a season of preparation and as a place where I was able to learn and to grow, and actually in a way that helped to cultivate a deeper passion within me for the work that He was going to be setting me to. So that when I come to it, it wasn't that I was just bringing a creative expertise into the mix. It was saying, hey, I believe that you have a message and your message has meaning. And I want to do everything that I can to help you get that message out to as many people as possible, to amplify your impact, to help extend your reach. Like, I cannot imagine having that same fire within me for what I do now if it wasn't going through the season that everybody would have called a failure in what I had set out to accomplish. And it's like, am I still passionate about those things? Absolutely, yes. You see it all over my social. I'll gladly share about like fitness and nutrition and personal defense because it means a lot to me. But I also saw God use those days of small beginnings where I was just the mom sitting at my kitchen table in the middle of the night with a candle and music going, working on illustrations while my kids slept, trying to get that thing off the ground. And it wasn't lost to anybody else that was going through it. Like it might have looked like, oh, okay, it's just not panning out. But God worked it out where it set the stage for me to develop the very skills that I needed for the business that I didn't even know I was going to launch. And for that time to come, that when I launched Ox and Iron, that I was able to pull, like when I launched it, I wasn't even looking at like, hey, I'm going to go into graphic. I was like, okay, God, like I'm not making enough money and I need to figure out how to help my family. I need to, do something. And I felt like that was where he was like, okay, just like start it. And I thought I was starting a side gig. And it was like, no. But it was the small beginnings where God allowed me to step into something like I couldn't imagine doing anything else right now. Like I couldn't imagine if I did not have the work that I do and doing branding and stuff. And it's not who I am. Like if God was to take it away today, then that He'd still be God and He'd still be good. And it would, you know what I mean? Like He would transition. But it's, I say that more as in like I get to be so passionate about what I do. And I felt like it was the first thing that I really hit my stride on. But it all went back to seeds that He was sowing when I was in a place of struggling. And it all went back to things that He was developing when I was saying, God, I don't know what I'm not getting. I remember the days of crying in my car. I remember the days of like, God, what is going on here? Right. And it's like, baby, you don't even know. You don't even know what I'm putting into motion. You don't even know what I'm setting into place and what it's going to transition into if you just hold on to me. And so I think that's like, man, when you think of it says author and perfecter, right? Author and perfecter. If I was in charge of writing my own story, it would fall very short of the story that God is writing. But instead, His glory story is what's being written through my life. And I get to hold on to that, knowing that even when it goes through the challenges and I face the monsters and the villains of my story, He's still God. And the story still has a very happy ending.
I love that. I love that because it's true. And sometimes we do face things that we don't want to. And you know, I think that's for a lot of Christians, they struggle. Well, if God gave me this business, why isn't it successful right away? Well, I'm sorry. I wish that was the case for everything. It's not. We're not a lot of Christian businesses fail, and I used to have the number, and I could have given you that, but it doesn't mean that you're a failure. And I love what you said about
Mm.
all the cool things that God was bringing into your life. He was sowing these seeds. Sometimes, it's like in our career, it's like you look back and all the seeds that God planted. For me, I started, of course, God put me in a home where I was in a pastor's home. So I learned about Christian media because my dad was on Christian radio and on Christian television. So I was already being um, planted. There were seeds being planted from five. There's a picture of me at 5 years old at the radio station with my dad, and that seed was planted. Then I got into to high school and into college, and the seeds that were planted there. My original thought I was going off to school to be a pastor, and God went, "No, no, we don't need you as a pastor. Stop."
No, you
No,
know.
no, I have a calling for your life. Just because you thought it was being a pastor, that wasn't it. And I got a chance to then get into Christian radio. I was back home after spending one day. I was the shortest alumni at the university I was at. I woke up in the middle of the night and I knew God, this is not where God wanted me. I mean, it was as clear as day
Mm.
that he was saying, this isn't where I want you. I called my mom and dad in the morning. They had just moved me in. I said, hey, you got to come move me back out. This is not where God wants me. Explained it to him. They came, brought a U-Haul truck, packed me back up. While I was there, while I was home again, my mom and my aunt went out to lunch with me and they said, well, first place, my mom knew I needed a job because she wasn't going to let me sit until the next quarter without some income coming in for myself. And they said, hey, listen, the radio station where your dad goes to record is looking for somebody. So now the seeds of me going since I was five made the now I will tell you, and I was on a radio show yesterday with a guy, and I told him, I said, it is the worst. They're called sound checks. It was the worst demo sound check you're ever going to hear. It was awful. I don't know why they hired me. I believe they hired me because they couldn't, under FCC rules, hire a monkey to do my job. So they had to hire me. And because the monkey probably could have done better for a cheaper price.
No.
And so I learned though a lot of things that I didn't know, and those were the next seeds that God planted. God put me in a situation where I learned about marketing, and learned how business worked, not only from my mom and dad and the businesses that they owned, but then I learned it in a hands-on environment with schooling, and God put all those pieces together, and voila, he had it all set up. Were there failures along the way? Yeah, I had two companies that right out of the gate while I was still working in radio that failed completely. I mean, like they were gone. And at a point 6 years into being in broadcasting, I took a step of faith that I knew God had a plan, and we launched the company that I still run, and that is Coastal Media. And we started helping ministries get on television and radio. We've done over 300 now. We've helped over 300 ministries get to radio and TV, which is incredible. And it's a blessing. But those seeds were sown. Not only were they sown when I was an adult, but they were sown when I was a child with what God was doing. He's like, hey, I'm going to shape you, Rob, to do these things. This is what I have for you. This is where I'm going to take you. Yeah, there's going to be hardship. You're going to have it. You're going to have times where you question why you're doing this. But if you know that you know that you know that God is there for you, he will take care of you.
I love that so much. And I love seeing how he's transitioned you into the space of not only doing the consulting for other ministries that are looking to transition into a digital platform, but also with everything that you're doing with Abundant TV, seeing that growing as the Fastix network. And I would love for you to unpack a little bit more on that because I think, especially in step with the rest of the conversation up to this point, is that there is sometimes an assumption that if we're going out and we're doing the good thing and we're bringing the word of God, that it's like that's all we need and it's just going to be blessed and it's going to take off running. And unfortunately there are some people that have the best message that doesn't get heard. And I don't want that for anybody that is in that space where God has given them a voice to speak out into the market, to speak out into communities. So, what would you say to the person that is either operating, like launching a podcast, or maybe they've had it up and running for some time, or they're trying to build out their network, but they're having trouble getting that message to really land? What are maybe a couple things that you've learned along the way that you're like, if you just start like this could be a huge level up?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I love that.
Loaded.
Every e- everything that is done with audio and video. So like this podcast, or if you run a podcast, everything is formulated. There is creating a moment. Um, in television and radio, we talk about, you have basically 60 seconds from the time you start talking to hook somebody. Now they believe that that number, though the study hasn't been done recently, they believe it's down somewhere around 30%. So you open with fire. You open with whatever it is that, makes you sound authority, like you're an authority, and it makes you also likable. Again, we go back to transparency. I did not always want to be transparent when I was on radio and TV, for simple reasons. You don't always want to look like a goof. And a lot of times I look like a goof when I do radio and TV. But I would say to the people that are watching it, and do what your passion is. And then the second part of that is surround yourself with people who have the same passion. The people I love to interview and I love to hang out with are people that are fire like I am. I want, it's like I could do creative production stuff like podcasts and like television 24 hours a day. I don't get tired of it. Now I do get tired in real life because I'm getting old. But in real life, I mean, like 9 o'clock, we were watching figure skate, and then all of a sudden I'm doing, what was it? Yeah, yeah, I'm excited about that. Um, but I would say find the passion and then watch. Here's the piece of advice. So if you are somebody that's in the podcast world, and I'll give you this little, it's 2 minutes of things that I would do. So listen to your last five podcasts. You're gonna hate hearing your own voice. I hate my wife. This drives me nuts. My wife will watch my stuff, and I hate hearing my own voice. And I've probably, safe to say, television wise, I've probably been on or hosted over 2,000 shows for different
Oh wow.
networks, including big networks and little networks. And I hate hearing my voice. I've been on radio. I was in syndicated radio in the Christian world for 11 years. I never listened. I would hate it. The stations I would go visit, and if I was on, I would make them turn the monitors down. I do not like hearing my voice, but you need to do this. And so it got through this moment and take it apart, like you um just like you were diagramming. If you're not a sports person, like you were diagramming a sentence. But if you're a sports person like I am, diagramming the plays. How did this sound? Why did this sound good? How did when I did this, I liked this? What features do I add to my show? What are things that I do that makes my show stand out differently? It is great to be an you know excited, enthusiastic of what you're doing, but how does what you say or what you're doing make an impact on Jeff Smith or Jennifer Jones who are listening? Because it's great to talk. I love talking. If you haven't noticed, I love talking. I love, but if I'm just talking to myself, I'm not making an impact to anyone. So how do I make that impact? So if it's a business podcast, how do I make my business podcast different? What is the one thing I can add that is different than anyone else that's doing it? How do I make myself stand out? Um, does that mean I have to do different things? One of the things when I launched the show that I do, which is called The Morning Break, which you can see on Abundant TV, is I married the two favorite things I do in life, which is television and radio. It is basically a morning show with guests, which they do on radio anyway. And so that's the passion I have. So I went into it and I went, okay, I'm going to have people that interest me on the show. And then I hope that they interest other people. And then I'm going to watch. And if you would have watched the show from 5 months ago, which was the first show, it is nothing like what we have. The show evolves. Anything in podcasting, television, radio, anything, art is the same way, I'm sure, though I can't draw two straight lines to save my life. Is it evolved? And God, if you're praying and seeking God in those areas, He will help you to evolve what you're doing. Like I said, my show 6 months ago to the show that you see now, completely different. And it's still me as the host, though I'm sure there are people that would like me replaced, but then it wouldn't be the morning break with Rob Patz. But you know, I think that's the thing you can do. If you can go back, take 5 of your episodes you've done, or if you haven't done any yet, which is great. This is so I'll tell you what we did when I worked in television. I worked in some network stuff. We shot 4 shows that never saw air, and I'm thankful for one of the TV networks. But we took those 4 episodes and tore them apart. I mean, you have to have
Mhm.
thick skin to do this because you have to say, hey, listen, I stumbled here, or I'm going to need to take notes, or I'm going to have to do this. And I want to make this better. How? How do I fit into what people want to hear? Because with podcasting especially, there are millions of podcasts. How do I create and be transparent? Something we've talked about during today. Hey, be transparent. I tell people I'm scared of heights on my show. I'm not doing that because I'm scared of heights. I won't do There are things I will not do. Roller coasters. I won't do
Yeah.
certain things. I just won't do it. But it becomes part of something that I will tell you. I wrote my senior paper on this, and that is, how do you create a narrative? And a narrative is like anything else in life. Where's your starting point? Well, it was a cold and rainy night. Well, your podcast should have that same thing. It starts with, it was a business that I wanted to start, or it's a TV show that God would not let me not do. And that's really what it is with my show. My wife and God bothered me for a year and a half beforehand, and I could not get away from both of them. I live with one, and one's with me all the time. And
Yeah.
they both were like, you need to do this. And I was like, my time has passed. And if you've ever really done TV, and the cruel thing, and I talked to a friend of mine who works for Fox, and we talked about it today. The cruel reality is there's a certain point where on television, especially, they come to you, and they did me, and they come to you and say, we're going to move in a different direction because the demographic is changing. Interpreted, you're old and nobody wants to watch their dad on TV. Um, you know,
Gosh.
and so that's kind of it. So you have to, and back to your statement about podcasting, you have to really do the hard stuff. You have to build the narrative. Tell me, what is your narrative? What is the story? And not only the story that you want today. So the morning break, the show I do, I'll use it as an example because I've done this. This is because it's what I do. It's I did it for my own show. I figure it's like physician, heal thyself. I thought I better do it for me. So my goal for the morning break is not just to be 30 minutes that takes up space every day on television and audio and podcast. It's I have goals of, I want to do shows live and remote from Washington, D.C. I want to be at the Super Bowl. And you have to write those things down because here's the key. We started the narrative with, this is my first day. I love business. It's why I'm starting this podcast. By podcast 5, hi, this is my podcast. We talk about business. By podcast 25, you've changed again. Or if you're like me, hi, this is Rob Patz, the morning break. In a year from now, I want to be broadcasting from Washington, D.C. and do a set of live shows from there. And so that's my goal. How am I working my way there? How does every day or every week, if you're a weekly podcast, how are you building those building blocks of where you want to go? Because just putting out a podcast is not enough because there are millions of podcasts. How do you connect with the people that are there? And you have to have a real desire to do that. If you don't have a real desire to connect daily, weekly with people who listen to you, then probably podcast and media in general is not for you, because you've got to be willing to be open and honest, and, with all your warts, still be the person that listens, that wants to help. I think podcasting is great because it gives so many people a voice to teach people that are desiring to see it.
Mm. Well, and there's so much of what you said that I feel like it's really not limited to the podcasting space. It's really not limited to people that are looking to do a YouTube channel or something. You have people that have zero ambitions of any of that, but understand that they need to have a content strategy at work in their business to help them take their messaging out there. And one of the things that I also love that you hit on was having that willingness to be vulnerable enough and humble enough to listen to what it is that you're putting out there, take it in from the viewpoint of the person that's receiving it, and give it an honest assessment. That's something that I see people sometimes cringe about when it comes to their brand in general, is that I'm like, hey, if you do nothing else today, like pause, go onto your website, but be that person that has never seen it before, right? Like try as much as possible. Like we all have our own bias, but you got to strip that and say, if I was approached by this, if I clicked this link and this is what I saw, what impression would I have? And I found that I do that too, like what you were talking about allowing yourself to unpack what it is that you're saying, whether it's on video or straight audio, is there's tonality, posture, all of these things. Sometimes it's what you're saying, sometimes it's not necessarily what you're saying, but how you say it, the tilt that it gives it, that can either really help to pull somebody in or push them away. And I think there's a sense of duty that we have, or responsibility that we should carry when it comes to stewarding the message, in being willing to do the work that's uncomfortable, that makes us cringe, that makes us pull in, to say, okay, God, I know the message that you gave me is important and I know that I want to help people with it. How can I get better at communicating that message so that the people that most need it can receive it in the way that you intend it?
That's
That's not a
awesome.
straight out of the gate thing for most of us. And
No,
so it,
but that's awesome. That's the truth. The other thing I would say is, with a podcast, print a calendar, print a 6-month calendar for me. And this is a thing that we do in our consulting. Print a 6-month calendar and write down something you're going to do every day. If you record once a week, do that. Write down something that you're going to help to better what you're doing once a week.
yeah, that is so good. And before we do go, there was a couple of other things that I'm like, oh, I don't want to miss. I told you I have my whole list of things, and we didn't even get to half of it. And that just means that we're gonna have to schedule a part two. I'm just, I'm not even asking. I'm voluntolding you. I'm voluntelling. I know it's ridiculous, but out of all the things that I definitely would love to be able to hit on before we wrap up for today, one of the things that we had talked about when we did that kind of preliminary call, and I would love for more people to hear your take on, is when it comes to creating content, it's understanding that we're not just saying a thing out into the world, but that we are using it as another way to invite people into a space. And we talked about consumer experience and creating an enjoyable atmosphere around what it is that we are putting out into the world. What would you say, as far as somebody who maybe feels like they're missing that part of it, or feels like they're looking for ways to really do that better? I mean, it's an online platform, or it's a digital space, or it's just video or just audio. How can I really set the table so people feel welcome to come in and enjoy what I'm putting before them?
I think it's so incredibly important in the time that we live in. People are striving more and more to be a part of a community. I want to always feel like I'm part of some community. My wife and I actually started praying last year for our circle. I believe it's biblical. You can look it up. I'm not going to quote where it's at because I always mess it up. I'm always off a couple verses, but it's biblical. You can look it up, that God has a circle of people for you, your own circle, your community. And I think with people that are in business, they need to have that community. It's that the group of people that feel like they'll go through a wall for you, that they will believe in you. And how you build that in a flat, what we call a flat space, because you're not really, they're not coming into your store. They're not, they're not gonna, they're seeing you in a flat space because it's your screen. They're seeing you. It's, I think it's again very much, and it's, we could call it the theme of today. It's transparency. It's also building an image of what you want. I love a thing that I'm big into. I love clothes. Just so you know this, and this is where my example is going to come from. So I love clothing. I am not the guy that has like three shirts. I'm the guy that has three shirts in almost the same color blue. So that to give you an idea, I have a walk-in closet and another closet in another room in our house, just pretty much full of dress shirts. So if that gives you kind of an idea, so I'm going to give you my example from that world and from that perspective. So there's a company called Buck Mason. If you've not heard of Buck Mason, you may not be a guy. And if you're a guy, you've heard of Buck Mason, because it's kind of that rugged, cool California feel. Buck Mason went into their whole marketing plan going, we're not going to be for everybody. Not everybody's going to want to buy our clothes, but we're going to create a context where this group of people feels comfortable together in a community. And there are points, touch points inside of our community. And again, a lot of their community, because they're not in that many towns, is again what we call flat space, where they're posting things that tie to the, and here's the key thing. If you're a podcast or if you're a business, not everything has to be about you. I hate to tell you this, but it doesn't. It can be about something that has nothing to do with you, and you're gonna be okay. Trust me, nobody's going to leave because of it. So Buck Mason has this great thing where, and this tells you how much I love clothes. So my wife and I were going to Columbus, Ohio. We live outside Toledo, so it's about 2 hours. They have a Buck Mason. Okay, I get to the hotel where we stay. It's Eaton Center. It's a mall, outside mall, and I knew they had a Buck Mason there. And literally, we checked into the and we're not getting paid by them, but it's the Hilton that's on site. It's a very nice Hilton. Um, but if Hilton wants to sponsor this, I'm sure we'd be okay with it. But my thought was, I want to go to the Buck Mason because I'd been in California, which is where they started. And their big thing is they always have a British sports car in the inside
Oh,
their
cool.
and so went in there. And if you look at my Facebook, you see my goofy smile, and I'm in Buck Mason, not to buy anything. I didn't even buy anything that day. I went there to take a picture, post it on social media, because I'm part of the culture of Buck Mason. And so if you create the culture or the community of who you are, Abundant TV is a great example. We believe that you live an abundant life, that God wants us to. John 10:10 says that clearly. It doesn't mean that when, and people get scared about this, they say, well, you're talking about just money. Abundance is not just money. Abundance is the life that we lead, the things that happen. And so is money great? Yeah, I will tell you, I am not against money. I like money. I don't love, because you can't, but if there's that fine line between love and like, I live right there on that line. I'm close to love, but not quite. I really, really, really like it. And so I would say, if you're doing that, is create that space. So if it's a business, if you're a business podcast and you're doing it, hey, listen, you share things that maybe you read and you went, wow, I really like that. That's, Forbes had this great article. I'm not saying they do, because I haven't read Forbes in a while, but I'm just saying, or something like that, you share and you tie in your own thing, and then say, hey, listen, join me this Thursday. I'm dropping a brand new podcast about how marketing and life together are happening. And you, during that week, you also maybe share you sitting at your desk going, man, I'm pounding out this week's. Well, I hope if you're doing a podcast, I hope it's done already. Unless you're like me and crazy and you do it the same day and you do it live. But for everyone else, and I wouldn't recommend that if you're starting up, please don't go live start, because you will
Yeah.
have bad things happen. And if you've never done bad things happening all at once, you'll melt down. Trust me, I've almost melted down. Um, but I would say that I would say create the community and create people and then harvest that community. Here's the biggest thing that I would tell people is and it struck me when I was thinking of this that the average church in the United States is about 60 people. So if you have a group of people and maybe you've got 100 people in your group, in your circle that listen to your podcast, that's more than a lot of churches. And they have stuff that goes on to shepherd those people. You need to shepherd your people. And again, I'm not saying your podcast is religious. It could be, and then you want to shepherd them in that way. But also something we talked about, and we tie this up in a bow today, is integrity. Hey, be the person that shares the integrity of your business with maybe other business people that listen to your podcast and say, hey, listen, it's tough. Sometimes I don't want to be full of integrity and full. I want to make the quick dollar. I want to do the thing that cuts the corner. But in the end of the day, God's got something incredible. So build that community. No matter if that community starts with 3 people, you, your wife, and your mom. That's pretty much what my community started with. Actually, I was before I was married. So it was my mom and my aunt and me. That was my community. But it
Yeah.
started with those people.
I love it. You're just practicing on the job.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah. That it I love everything that you shared today, and honestly, like I said, there are so many more questions I would love to unpack with you. So, don't be surprised if I reach out and I'm like, "Hey, Rob, we're hopping back on. When are you available?" That if you would be so kind as to make time
Oh,
for me
would
anyways.
love to
But,
come back.
no.
You make it. Let's do it.
All right. I mean, I really, really love everything that you have to share. I certainly don't want to leave this note without people having access to more of Abundant TV and everything that you have going on. Can you tell them where is a good place to find you and connect with you after this podcast?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. And I know that's very cliche when we're on a business podcast, but it's the truth. My favorite place to do a lot of work is LinkedIn. So find me there. It's just Rob Patz, just my name. You can see me on the profile smiling in front of the sign for the radio station I own.
Awesome. And of course, I'm going to make sure that the links are in the caption so you guys can grab and connect with him right away. Before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can catch more on building a brand and a business that you absolutely love. Rob, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate everything that you shared, and I look forward to connecting with you again here soon. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You take care.